you've often said that we failed our children in India.
We failed our children globally, actually.
Sure,
globally.
Sure. But
India is not different from the rest of the world.
Fair point. But since
if 168 million children in the world are still languishing in child labor,
that's true.
And we are all talking about a big advancement in technology, and we have already conquered Mars, and now we are talking of Pluto. How come so many children remain as child laborers? How come 5.5 million children are virtual slaves in the world? How come the world cannot spend $18 billion to educate all its children in primary classes?
Is that all it will take?
Just $18 billion annually is needed to educate children in the world, which is just 3.5 days of global military expenditure. 3.5 days. So it's not a big deal. So that's why this is a big fight. We have to prioritize the issues of children and invest on them now, so that we can get rid of not only child labor and slavery, but many dangers which are looming on the mankind. If children are not being protected properly, then they are most vulnerable to be manipulated or misused by the fundamentalist forces. I'm not talking about one religion or other religion or other faith. It could be misused by anyone, and this is happening in the world. So that's why we have to invest on our children now for their education and protection.
You know, you're here at the TICON. The who's who of corporate America, corporate India here, leading technology companies are here. What's the message that you would like the private sector to take away? I mean, we've been talking largely about what the government can do and so on and so forth. But what is the role that the private sector can play here?
Well, the power of business could be harnessed for the good for children, and that is very much possible. I have some experience working with some industries in the past, and I have realized that that power has to be harnessed for the betterment of children. They can feel more responsible towards the children. They can do business with compassionate intelligence. Of course, all the business are aimed at profit, and that is done through intelligence. But let us combine compassionate intelligence with businesses so that we can make this world a better world.
But in specifics, you know, if you had to sort of design a blueprint at this point in time of the private sector's involvement, what would the key priority areas be of how they could actively engage in this issue?
First thing is that they can make sure that no child labor is engaged. No child labor is engaged in the supply chain.
That's right.
That's very simple and clear, but it's complicated. It's not easy. But that is something which should be in the minds of the entire private sector. The second thing is that technology can play an important role in checking and curbing and monitoring human trafficking, for instance. It can be used for many ways. The biometric systems can be very useful for monitoring the human trafficking. Also to check the school attendances and many other things. So how are we going to use the technology for the benefit of children? That is another important area I could think of. And they have talent beside technology. They have treasure that should go for the benefit of children. As I said, just $18 billion can bring all children to schools for a year, and
you know, the mind boggles at that number, that it's just 18 billion.
Yeah, 18 billion is nothing. As I said, that it is just 3.5 days of military expenditure. It's 5 days, no, sorry, 1/5 of what Americans spend on tobacco, or 1/6 what the Europeans spend on cosmetics. So 1/6. If you decide that you are going to put the money for the betterment of children in the world, you can do it. So it's achievable, it is possible. We have seen the progress over the last 15 years. The number of out-of-school children has been decreased from 130 million to 59 million, less than half now. We have seen the progress in the eradication of child labor. The number was 260 million 15-16 years ago. Now it has gone down to 168 million. So if we do it collectively, the state actors, corporate and the civil society must join hands to put an end to child labor and slavery. And that is possible. So we cannot do anything without the corporate involvement now. 20 years ago, the state was solely responsible for these issues, development of children or human right protection and so on. But now, the two major players have emerged over the time. One is corporate sector, another one is civil society. So these three pillars have to be intact and work together.
Let me also ask you, because we were talking about education, and you got experience of the previous government's experiment with the Right to Education Act. But given the state of primary education today, what do you believe needs to be done to ensure that it actually works?
Well, the whole world agreed on three major principles with education. One is it has to be inclusive. No child is left behind, especially the children which are hard to reach. Secondly, it should be equitable. And thirdly, it should be quality. So when we talk of education, we have to keep these three things in mind. And lifelong learning. The secondary education for all children is also a new promise, came under the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's very, very important. And it is for the first time that the international community agreed on something very new. The new area to end violence against children for development, to end child slavery, trafficking, child labor, forced labor, and child marriages for sustainable development. So these things are quite new. So that's why we have to see that how these different goals or sub-goals for development are converged in one direction, and a bigger cooperation from the private sector and public sector, including civil society, is ensured.
So what next for you, Mr. Sarthyathi? I mean, especially over the last 2 years since the Nobel, how has life personally changed for you? Of course, you've been traveling extensively before that. You've been focused on this issue before the Nobel as well. But what has the Nobel really done for the cause and done for the organization?
First of all, I will tell you that Nobel Prize has helped in pushing my agenda for the inclusion of child-related sustainable development goals, which was perhaps not possible or very difficult. I have been campaigning for quite some time, but after the Nobel, the prime ministers and presidents all across the world, including the President of the United States, not only had listened to it carefully, but supported the idea, and the UN Secretary General agreed to include these goals. So this worked well in terms of policy changes. But it is not enough. Now I wanted to launch a campaign, what I call 100 million to 100 million campaign. 100 million children and youth are deprived of their very fundamental things like human dignity, freedom, education, healthcare, nutrition, etc., etc. But on the other hand, 100 million plus youth are eager to do something. They wanted to accomplish something for the betterment of society and for themselves. So they are full of energy and enthusiasm and idealism that has to be channelized and leveraged for these 100 million left out children. So I am launching human history's most ambitious campaign in directly addressing 200 million young people in the world and bridging the gap between them. And let these 100 million plus young people should be the change makers, leaders, champions for the cause of 100 million left out children. That would be done through the social media. We will use the technology as well, and that is something which I am also trying to bring it.
This will be a volunteer initiative largely?
Absolutely. So they can.
So what are the goals that, the short-term goals as you launch this campaign, and when will the campaign be launched?
Short-term goal would be to create a sense of mutual responsibility, to create a sense of global citizenship, and some sort of connect. The young people should know about their rights as well as the problems of other children in the world. That could be the beginning. Then we wanted to call for concrete measures and indicators and concrete outcomes. That include, for instance, enhancing budgetary allocations at the country level, enhancing the global spending on education. Like today, only 4% of ODA goes towards education of children in the world. Only 4%. So that is a joke. So we have to build an environment and pressure from the young people, and they should demand it. The young people could also put pressure on the companies which are still using child labor knowingly that in their supply chain child labor exists. So as consumers, the young people can play a very important role. And social media is very, very powerful. And that is one of the messages I'm going to bring it over here in TiCon.
So 100 million to 100 million.
100 million to 100 million.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Sarthyathi, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us. We wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you.
With this campaign and all the other wonderful work that you're doing. Appreciate your time here on CNBC TV 18.
Thank you.
With that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV 18 special from all of us here. Goodbye. Many thanks for watching.